So, hello everyone. Today we have two very interesting people with us, and I want you to quickly introduce yourselves, and then I will share what we want to talk about today.
Hello everyone, my name is Abdurrahman Baraka. I'm a master's student here at the Technical University of Berg Academy Freiberg in MMT program in the steel specialization. And I think I will be starting my master thesis, which is the topic of this podcast next year. So it's going to be a very fruitful thing to talk about. I do have experience with publishing papers. I was a second author in a paper was published in Journal of Materials and Manufacturing, GMMP, which is a pretty good journal. And I'm really excited to have this fruitful talk with Dr. Qayyum.
So, hi, my name is Chaitrali. I'm also a student of the MMT program at TU Freiberg, and I am currently doing my master thesis with the Foundry Institute at TU Freiberg. Yeah.
Okay. And Chaitrali asked me an interesting question today in the morning, and she asked that how to prepare for a master thesis presentation, right? And this is the question that I'm usually asked by a lot of students, and I've answered it here and there, but I really wanted to record it today, so so I don't have to do it again in the future. So I am Faisal Qayyum. I am working at Institute of Metal Forming for the last 7 years. And for all those years, I have been engaged in supervising students, mostly from TU Freiberg, but also from other universities, from other countries, from all across the globe. And I have been sitting on the other side of the table for quite some time. And what I feel is that the students do not have a lot of information about what is happening on the other side of the table, and therefore, when they lack this information, they cannot prepare well for the master thesis. And I'm here to give you an insight into what happens on the other side of the table and how to prepare, how to account for that, and then prepare well. Right. So you might have this first question about what is a master thesis, right? It is important to understand what is a master thesis to then answer all the other questions. In a master thesis, what we usually do is we have all learned about the scientific method, right? It starts with an observation, and based on that observation, a hypothesis, and then a methodology to test that hypothesis. It can either, and then that methodology will prove that hypothesis right or wrong, and then in the end we will have some conclusions and maybe a theory that will say, okay, when this happens, that happens, and if this theory is then tested multiple times, it becomes a law, and then we know, okay, nature behaves like this, right? And in a master thesis, what we are doing is we're trying to help students experience this scientific method hands-on on a real problem or challenge to experience or to learn how to go through this, right? So the idea of a master thesis is that someone will tell you an observation, someone will tell you about an observation, and they will guide you to develop your hypothesis. And then you're on your own to develop a methodology to test that hypothesis, and then in the end explain how was your method working, and was that hypothesis proven right or wrong, and what are the outcomes, and so on. So what we want to do is we want to see if you are able to go through this process in a supervised fashion, and that is why you will have a supervisor. And that is why you are guided through this process. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So while when you are doing this, so primarily everything that you're doing in this process, so developing a hypothesis, testing it, and then proving it right or wrong, is happening in the lab or in the simulation software or on the page in mathematical equations and so on. But how will we know what you have gone through is we will have two things on our table. One is your written thesis, and then the other is at the end your presentation on that work, and that is how we will assess. So these are two our assessment criteria in the end. That is how we will assess how well you went through this process and how you should be graded on it. Okay, so this is the assessment task at the end, where we want to judge how well you went through this process. And in our university specifically, the written part of your thesis is 50% of the marks, and the oral examination at the end, which we are calling presentation, is also 50% of the marks. So in the end, you will get a grade for your thesis, you will get a grade for your presentation, and then they will be averaged to find your final grade of the whole thesis, right? Now, an important thing to understand is that your written part, once you appear for your oral presentation, your written part has already been checked by the examiners. That has already been discussed internally, based on an assessment metrics that we have. For example, how well the student performed on this and that, and how well the thesis was written, and was this clear and was that clear. So based on all these assessment matrices, that has already been graded. People have read it, they already know about your performance and your task and everything. So and they already know a grade that is assigned to your written task. Okay, and now you are coming for an oral presentation, so they are not completely blank, but they still might not have met you, and they might not have first-hand experience or exposure to your work,
or they would need some clarification for things that they have read.
Yes. Or when, for example, exactly when they have read it, they might have asked themselves some questions which they could not find answer to, and they are there to know the answers to them.
So in a way, it would influence my written grade if I were to answer these questions positively? Because you mentioned that my written grade would kind of be decided by my supervisors before my presentation begins.
Yes.
But when they will ask me about the written grade during the discussion part of my presentation, if I were to answer their queries or questions, will that help in bettering my grade in a way?
I think they just get a first impression when they read your stuff. I think reading the thesis, the structure, how it's written, how everything is presented, shows a lot about the person. So if I were a supervisor and I read something, you can show, without being a supervisor, like if we as students read the work of other fellow students, you can know that whether this person put some effort or not into the thing. And you can even just know what to decide from the defense. So you would even know whether the defense would be nice or not, just from reading the thesis.
Right.
So mostly the grade remains, so in the written work, mostly the grade remains same, right? But that is something that we might talk about at the end, that this is still not very rigid, because they can decide at the end, okay, the student performed exceptionally well in the talk, and they have a very bad grade here in the thesis, but maybe there was a confusion, maybe it should not happen like this, so bring this up, and then that is what the average is. Or the other way around as well. So they will say, oh, we thought the thesis was very well written, but now we see that the student did not know anything about it, so maybe someone else helped them write the thesis, and this is not their grade completely. So this is everything that happens in the closed rooms. But the idea that I'm trying to say is, usually people try to keep them separate. So the grade on your written thesis is mostly already defined, and it is fixed. And then when you come for an oral presentation, they check your or assess your knowledge based on how well you are able to communicate your research, and then usually those grades are averaged. But in extreme cases, your oral presentation does affect your grade in the written thesis. Theoretically, it should not.
All right.
Okay, so then we will not talk about the written part now, and we will only talk about the oral part of the examination, so which is your master thesis defense. It is we plan 1 hour for it, right? And the structure is in a way that 20 minutes are for the presentation, and then 40 minutes are for the question answer session. The first 20 minutes are fixed, right? So you will not get a minute more, but the last 40 minutes can be less or more depending on how much questions they have. Do they need more clarification? Are they giving you more time to explain yourself? Or it's just that there are so many people and they in your committee, and they want to ask you so many questions, and it will just normally take more time. So more time or less time does not mean higher grade or a lower grade. It just means they want to be as much clear as possible with everything, so you don't have to worry about you just focus on the first 20 minutes and let them do whatever they want for the next question answer session. But on average it is around 40 minutes. What we also tend to do is we also tend to look at the clock on the wall in the room. So we see when you started your presentation, when you end your presentation. It should not be more than 20 minutes. And then when someone is asking questions, they also look at the clock. So they want to use those on average 40 minutes of the time to extract everything from you as much as they can. Right? That is how it is divided. And then we can talk about the presentation part. So the 20 minutes that you will have.
Right. And essentially the presentation also in and of itself has two parts. That is the making of the presentation and the speaking of the presentation.
Yes.
You would say that, right?
Yes. But that is something that I will cover later. But what I want to talk about is, for example, when you are there in the room and you're about to start your presentation, what are the expectations of everyone that is present in the room? So your supervisor, in an ideal world, is there to support you, right? So they are there because they have seen you work. They are there because they have because you have worked with them extensively. It was their idea, and it was their methodology that they assigned you or guided you through to reach at the point where you are now. So in a larger scheme of things, it is your assessment, but in a smaller scheme of things, somewhere it is also their assessment. So how well they were able to help you go through this process, right? And your supervisor is primarily there to help you or assist you, right? And then there is this examination committee, which is there to basically balance things out. So they do not want a supervisor to be all nice and fine and okay with you. They want to test you on the other rubrics to see if you perform well on them as well, so they can grade you more appropriately. Okay. But the important thing to understand is that everyone is there to pass you. They're not there to fail you, right? You have to understand this. And then based on that, what I have written here is that please do not give them a reason to fail you, right? So the ideal first impression when everyone enters that room is this student has finished their work. We are just there to see what they have done, to give them an honest opinion on maybe how they could have improved, and congratulate them on how well they have worked, and then just leave the room all happy and fine. And it is very sad to see sometimes when the students themselves give reasons to the jury to not pass. And that happens primarily, for example, when you do not understand what a master thesis is about, right? So what is it that they're there to check? Do not do this. And then the next thing is press the right buttons to get the highest marks. You want to say something?
Yes, I wanted to ask you, did you experience any cases like this here at the university?
Yes.
That people came to their thesis defense and they didn't pass?
No. Yeah, they didn't pass. I have experienced this.
Because they weren't prepared, because they just like made it hastily, they didn't care really about the results. Did they do something very wrong, like for example plagiarism, like these no-goes, plagiarism, that they didn't get enough results,
yeah.
or did they just give off this impression that they actually hadn't done anything, worked or anything?
Yes. So primarily the reason the reason that you can give them that is that they have written the thesis very well, but now they don't know anything about it, or they do not primarily know about the scientific method, right? And those are the big reasons or red flags on, for example, because when you're passing your masters, you are expected to, for example, behave in a certain way for engineering problems or challenges, and you will fail your thesis when they will say, okay, you had this challenge and you could not behave professionally to this, right? So I have seen people pass with very nice grades with complete off results. So they ran simulations, they did this, they did that, nothing worked. Their time finished, they presented everything, and they passed out with very flying colors. I've seen this happening, and I've seen students failing when everything was working fine. Their thesis was written very well, but they could not satisfy the examiners that everything that they have written in the thesis is their own work, and they made all these. And usually what happens is, as I mentioned, your supervisor is there to support you and help you, and when they are supervising your master thesis, it is their examination as well that they can teach better, right? So most of the times supervisors will help you write a better thesis, prepare all the data, and you have limited time, so they will help you with finishing everything, but they are not passing the master's degree, you are, right? So in the end, everything might seem right on the surface, but if you go deeper, you will realize the student does not know the fundamentals of anything, and they should not get a degree. And that is a problem.
And in this case, they have to wait for the next turn of the thesis and just start all over again.
Start all over again on a completely new topic.
They can't continue the same topic with the same results.
No.
That is scary.
Yeah, but that is why I started with the first 2 points. So your supervisor is there to support you, the examination committee is there to balance that out, and everyone is there to pass you, right? So do not give them a reason to fail you, and that is what we will talk about. So what are those reasons and how you, and then the next thing is how to get the highest marks is press the right buttons. And what are those buttons is, for example, that is something that we talked about in the beginning. So what ideally a master thesis is, and what are we checking there, and so on, right? And then once you start talking, for example, that is the environment in the room, and then you will just start your presentation, right? And you, as we talked earlier, you are given 20 minutes to talk, and your talk should comprise of all the points that they are there to listen to. So as we discussed, you should start with the background. So anyone from any background can understand what you did. So start with one slide on the background, brush up the knowledge of the audience. Of course, they will be from the similar fields, but it is important to start from the very basic idea and then build up that knowledge to what is the current state of knowledge. So what do we know so far, right? Or what the industrial practices currently are, or what are the scientific achievements so far. So once we have established that, then we establish what is the problem there in our current understanding, in our current model, in our current practices, and so on. And based on that, so that is the problem statement. So people want to see if you are able to communicate your research to a wider audience in those 20 minutes, so you can establish what do we know so far and what is the problem at hand, and then you can clearly define, for example, okay, these are the aims that I will be working on in my
So first
talk.
comes the background, which can be the literature review. Is it the literature review of your printed thesis?
Okay, this is interesting. So I want to separate the thesis part from this presentation thing, and that is why what I will say is I will use an example, right? So if I worked on the crystal plasticity modeling of trip steel composites, the background is not primarily the state of the art or the introduction of my thesis. It is primarily, okay, we are using a lot of materials in our daily lives. We need high strength and high ductility materials, and we can achieve that with certain materials, but they have their own challenges and problems, right? So this is my background,
Which is a mix of your introduction and literature review.
which is basically, again, I'm separating these
Mhm.
two. So what I want to do is I want to build knowledge of the audience into what I'm going to say next. And then the next thing is, okay, so these materials seem interesting because they give us both, right? So the building up the knowledge, and then people know this, and therefore they have tried to manufacture these materials, they have tried to test these materials, and this is all state of the art, right? The current knowledge that we have about these materials, and what I want to do is I want to mention this, not to boast that I have read a lot of papers and I know a lot, just to establish my problem statement. So I will quickly steer this in the direction of people have tried to manufacture these materials, but when they try to manufacture it, this happens, and because of this we are unable to reach this point, and that is my problem statement, right? So we don't know how to do this.
Mhm.
And therefore my objective in this work was to try to do this by using this method, so that we can reach this point.
All right. So a quick question. I know that we are not comparing the presentation with the thesis, but just to keep the coherency of both of those aspects alive, I wanted to ask, in our printed thesis, our aims and objectives sort of get discussed first, and then we go into the state of the art or literature review. But in your presentation, it would be better if you discuss the background first, lead to the state of the art, and then talk about your problem statement or your objectives of the thesis.
Yeah.
That would be...
So in my mind, it is a more logical way of the storytelling, right?
Mhm.
So you first brush up so basically it is the introduction only, but with a hint of more recent advancements in this realm of what you have worked in. And it does not have to be, for example, specifically from literature. For example, it can also be industrial practices, and that is why I am not putting a finger on you should have this structure. But the idea is you have to build up your story from a very broad base to your problem statement, and then define the aims in 5 minutes out of those 20 minutes that you have.
Okay, that's a lot.
Yes.
Mhm.
So give some time. So 4 or 5 minutes, give some time to build up your story, introduce your topic, overview of your presentation, then build up this story on up to your problem statement, and then aims and scope, and then quickly jump to your actual work. So that is my idea. Of course, if you knew all this and you have written very well, so you have written exactly like this in your thesis, ideally you should have. If you have, then there will be a very nice parallel between your thesis and your presentation.
Okay.
But sometimes students might have missed this in their thesis. So they might not have a clear problem statement, and they might not have exactly defined their objectives or aim and scopes. But now the presentation gives you a chance to rectify that. So that is where we come towards this point of, can I use my presentation to improve my points in the thesis? If you can show this, that okay, now you understand the storyline and you can clearly define these points, then it helps you as well.
Just to be clear, you said 5 minutes for only the aim or
No,
also for the background?
Until aims at scope.
Okay, so background, your state of the art, aim, all
Problem
should be
statement,
covered.
aims,
Yeah.
within 4 or 5 minutes. I
Okay.
think that's
All right.
that's quite adequate,
Mhm.
right? And then comes the main part of what you did. So that is methodology. Some students do just specifically in a master thesis. Usually you will focus on one thing or one objective, and there the methodology can be relatively shorter, right? So you in the methodology part you have to describe how your setup was and what you used and how you used it, and what for example, how many simulations did you run and how did you identify the parameters. And in your experimental methodology you will say how you manufactured your material, how you prepared the samples, how you tested them, which machine you used, and what data did you get, and how did you post process the data, or if you used any functions or scripts or calculations to post process the data. You would also tell a little bit about it to prepare the audience about the reliability of results that you will show later. So explaining methodology is important by keeping in mind that this will be used for assuring the reliability of the results that you will get at the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
If you are not explaining a lot about your numerical simulation method, if you're not explaining a lot about where did you collect the data, how did you collect the data, how did you plot the data, later they will have a lot of questions about, but you were running simulations on this, I understood this, where is this data coming from, and you did not say anything about this parameter, and now all of a sudden this is appearing on the slides. So if you will not explain your methodology well, your results will again seem confused and they will not make more sense. So methodology is there to make sure that people are able to understand your results better.
And in the off chance that I have a lot of things that I've done in my methodology, is it fine if I skip a few things that may not be relevant?
That is a good question. So it is not a good idea that you skip a few things. It is a good idea if you skip details of few things. So you can say, I did this test with this machine, but it requires a lot of time to explain. I will not do that. If you will need more information, I have extra slides. We can talk about it later.
Okay, so it's fine if I say this.
Yes,
during my
it is absolutely fine, because they know you are under the clock. You have specific time. You know what is more important to talk in these 20 minutes. So if you feel like this was not a super important thing, you can always skip. So you can, for example, say, I use this software with this technique and I calibrated these parameters, or I found out these parameters from literature and used them for these simulations, and then I set up this and that, and you can talk about it. And then you can say, if you want to know more about the methodology or how I collected the results, I have extra slides. We can talk about that later.
And then you'll be sure that they would ask these questions, and that would use up from their quote of questions at the end.
Yes.
And so you'll be able to sort of steer the presentation instead of finding yourself with unexpected questions.
Yes. And also, it will make them know that these things are important to talk about, but due to the time constraint, you didn't talk about them.
Right.
Right.
Mhm.
So you're acknowledging. You are basically proving their expectations, that okay, she at least knows that this should be covered, right? And then you just go to the next steps, right? So if they will be genuinely interested in this, they will ask you these questions. Then comes the biggest part of your talk, which is your results.
About the methodology, how much time should I take for it?
So it depends. If you have just one step or one topic, then maybe 2-3 minutes, not more. And then if you have an extensive methodology, then you might take some more time. And then what I want to do, what I want you to focus on is at least take double or triple the time of methodology in your results section. So your results section is the main section where you should spend most of your time. If you will give more time to the methodology, then you will have extensively less time for discussing the results, which we do not want. Right?
Right.
So then comes the results part, where you have to talk about your results. Usually think of this as results and discussion. So you're not just explaining, I obtained this graph. You're also explaining its significance. You're also explaining what does that mean, right? And how does this fit in my bigger picture of fulfilling the aims and scope? So results and discussion. So usually you should play it like this, but sometimes it is possible that you show some of your results, and then you have a separate discussion slide to share. For example, these are the results I got. This is what industry was already working on, and this is what people have reported in literature. So my results are better than what we observed. So this synthesis of your information and into a meaningful way is the discussion part. And just showing what the simulation gave you, so all the colors and graphs and figures and codes, is something that is part of the results, right? What we are interested in is we are interested in knowing what results you got, and also if you can make meaningful sense of that data, right? So the discussion part, you should always focus on this. And then this results and discussion section can be, for example, 6, 7, 8 minutes long.
All right.
Depending on how much time did you give to the other parts and how much time you have left now. And then the last thing is your conclusions. So your conclusions should basically come back to should basically align very well with your aims in the beginning, right? So your conclusions should be, for example, this was our aim, and that is what we now, after doing this, we have realized that this is how this thing happens. And so they should be more objective. They should basically comply with all the aims and scopes you mentioned in the beginning. So for example, if you say we are trying to tackle this manufacturing problem, or we are trying to develop this new methodology with the help of which we can do something like this, the idea is that in the end you are able to show that now if you use this and this and this and that parameter and adjust them in a way like this, you will be able to obtain these results in the end. So basically going back to the aims, this is the whole that will basically complete your whole story. There is no, what I always suggest is you should not have a separate reference slide at the end, because no one looks at that slide at the end. You should always have references at the bottom of your page wherever you use that data, whenever you use data from other references. So they are there exactly on that slide, so people can look at the reference when they want.
Yeah, and that includes not only the pictures but also the text references, or
if there are any.
Okay.
So for example, if you say Germany has this much population, and you're using, so this will be a text and you're using it from somewhere, then it is always a good idea to cite that.
Okay.
And especially for pictures. Then their question is then you also had another interesting question, was that do you always have to use the same pictures in your thesis, or you can use different pictures? Can you answer that question now based on what I have told you?
You can use it if it helps your case.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So in the presentation you should always put less text on the slides and more images and figures. You should always speak that text out with through your mouth. And if it help in the thesis, basically you're writing everything, and maybe paragraphs contain different text and information. But when you're preparing a presentation, maybe you're saying something, but a picture on the slide will help reinforce whatever you are saying. So you can always have new pictures on the slide that they do not always have to come from your thesis. And more importantly, in your thesis, maybe, for example, you are showing one picture on one page and another picture on another page. And in your thesis, you can make nice constructions, and you can label them, and you can animate them a little to show nice trends out. Where, for example, in your thesis, you have written in the text, so at this point in figure 5 shows this, and now I'm extending this in figure 7 below, right? But in your presentation, you can basically show these figures side by side, and you can label them and construct them in a way that they show this meaning in a visual form rather than just saying it out.
Right.
So they always do not have to be separate or this. And then, for example, if you look at this timeline breakout, so 5 minutes starting from the beginning of the presentation until the aims, 3 minutes for the methodology, 6 minutes for the results, 5 minutes for discussion and conclusion, you still have 1 minute tolerance in this 20-minute realm. It is always a good idea to finish your presentation 15 minutes or 30 seconds before the 20 minutes end. It is okay to finish at 20 or 21 minutes. It is super bad if you finish at 25.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
So they do check that you were able to comply with the time limit or guideline. And as soon as you will stop your presentation, someone will look at the clock and they will tell the room, okay, you took this much time. Usually that happens. Or someone will record it. So this is the time you took. This is looked at critically.
I have a weird question. It's not weird. It's so. What about the audience? So can you bring as much friends and support as you possibly can? Because and does that affect you? Because I know that you had your PhD defense a couple of months ago, and I think your room was packed. I would have loved to come, but unfortunately I couldn't because I had an important lecture then.
Yeah.
But does it make a difference, and how?
It depends on. For example,
it doesn't affect the committee. The committee will if they want to slay you, they will slay you anyway.
Does it make a difference? The question is for whom? For me or for the committee? So you already answered it. For the committee, it will not make a difference, but having more audience in the room, more people seeming to take more interest in your work, passively shows, or
the committee
at back of your head shows that okay, more people are interested in this work, and it is always a nice idea, right? And again, what I said was the master thesis defense, although it is kind of an exam, or a PhD defense, although it is a kind of an exam, it is still a moment to celebrate. Because most of the people are there, as I said, most of the people are there to pass you. If you have done your work, if you have checked all the boxes of the scientific method, and you can show that you tried as much as you could in the 6 months, you will pass eventually. And you want to, and instead of being afraid and instead of hiding in the corner of the room, it is always a good idea to share it with most of the people. And therefore, and also on the other side, you also want to have more people there to support you, right? As the duty of your supervisor is to help you through this process, it is also the duty of, for example, the people who are close you to help you with this.
But it can go either ways, because anybody who is in the room of your defense is allowed to ask you questions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it can be that sometimes you might get asked a question which you don't know an answer to, and can it affect the influence that you have had until that point on the committee?
Yes, but why does it matter if you pass? Again, so that is what I think. So when I can talk about my PhD defense, that I wrote a very public post about everything, and then there were a few people there who asked me very tricky and challenging questions, and I noted them down. I didn't know an answer to them. Maybe it affected my grade. I noted them down, and then they were helpful for me later, so I could read about them, and then we wrote a project proposal out of one of these questions. So maybe this is an interesting thing we should investigate, and give us money for that. So
that is nice. Mm-hmm.
You always have to it depends on how you're looking at with what perspective you're looking at things. So if you've already really given your 100%, then you will want people to come and ask you questions. If they ask you a question and you do not know an answer to, you can very easily say, I don't know about this, but what I can understand, this is interesting and I will look into it. And it will just increase your knowledge, right? And no matter in which position you are, even the professor who is sitting in the room does not know everything in the world.
That's a relief. No.
Yeah. So it is understood that in 6 months' time you do not know everything that is happening in the world. What they want to see is that, can you acknowledge this? So do you have enough depth that at least you know what you worked on and you know what you do not know, rather than trying to make guesses or trying to or you do not, or this you should know a little bit about it and you do not know at all. But then the idea is with what perspective should you prepare your presentation. So my suggestion is, try to cover wider audience in your presentation. So instead of being very critical or go very deep into the topic by showing all the equations and all the models behind your work, try to stay relatively general in your presentation and talk, and then always mention, if you want to know more about this, I have extra slides and we can talk about the model, we can talk about this methodology, we can talk about these details and all those things. So, but keep in mind that your story should be generally understandable by most of the audience that is in the room, so they can get a better idea of what you worked on. And then keep other slides below to answer more deeper questions that are more specific, right? So anyone can ask any question. It will always be a good idea if you will have more slides, and you can the slides are not there to answer. Slides are there just to assist you with answering. Okay. And then a question can be, for example, how will you know which questions can be asked later and which slides you should keep on the side. So then once you will know, for example, the line of your presentation and the story that you're trying to tell there, and then you can compare that with the discussions you have with your supervisor, or maybe the comments that your examiner gave on your thesis, that your thesis does not include this information or that information. So that information or those comments are important for these people, right? So once you know that my storyline of the thesis is going in this direction, my storyline in the presentation is going in this direction, but I have not addressed this point which people were asking me there, I have not addressed this point which came across my talk, I have not addressed this point which I spent a lot of time on, but was extra work. Eventually we moved on to something else, but those are interesting results. If someone asks, did you try that? And you can always show them, yeah, I tried this and this and this, it did not work, therefore now we are working on this, right? So so the idea about extra slides and information will come from these deeper discussions that you will be having with your supervisor, your examiner, maybe something you will read in research papers that you would be following, that, oh, this information can be interesting, I have also investigated this, but I could not include it in my presentation, maybe I should have it as an extra slide. Oh, okay. We are already on 43 minutes mark, and it's 17:34.
I think since we crossed the 40 limit, we can give we can go until 50. We can just wrap up in the coming 7 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, I only have content for next 7 minutes.
We'll try to stay on the limit.
Yeah. And this is basically all about the presentation.
All right.
The 20 minutes. And now we have to talk about the rest of the 40 minutes. The idea of the examination committee and the jury is there to use those 40 minutes and to ask you all the questions they can in this time to know how deep your knowledge is, right? And there are some questions that are relatively more specific. They are specific to what you have worked on, and what your state of knowledge is. So they are critical, but there are also some questions that are on the loose edges. Now, for example, they would want to know, okay, what is the real significance of your research then? Or how was your experience with this? Or how much did you learn about that? So they can also ask these kind of questions, and they want to see, for example, how you respond to them. But generally, the question line, from my experience, is usually in the direction of whys. So do you really know the fundamentals? So you have done a numerical simulation, and the question they will ask is, why did you use this software? Why did you use this model? Why did you use this parameter? Why did you only do simulations for these 10 or 50 or 100 or 500 cases? Why not 5,000? Why did you use this mesh? Why did you do only these characterizations? Why did you only compare this profile and not the other 10 profiles? Do you understand that?
Yeah, I also have a question for these wise questions. Sometimes the answer is just that I did not have enough time, or maybe my license ended and something like that, if it's related to simulation. Can I be honest and say these reasons?
Yes.
Okay.
So you can so again, you can always say this, but you have to know the right choice of words. So the right choice of word, for example, will be, yeah, this is exactly what I asked when I looked at this data to myself, and this is what I discussed with my supervisor. So you have to be generally truthful, and then but then my primary topic of work was in this direction, and therefore I did not have enough time to explore this more. But now you have mentioned it. If someone else can work on it, it will be a nice possibility to work on.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Okay.
So you have to acknowledge that it already crossed your mind. You knew about this, you already thought about this, you discussed this with someone, but because your topic was in some other direction, which you know exactly how different these are, that is why I did not work on this.
All right.
And people know that software's licenses are not indefinite, that you have a finite time, and you can only fit enough things there. But they want to listen from you if you acknowledge that, if you can understand what they're saying, and that you acknowledge, and then you can put it in the right perspective.
Yeah, and have well-structured answers for it, and not just say, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's a good strategy to start by acknowledging this remark from the committee, which is, yes, thank you for that question, you are totally right, and then you just pick up from there. I think it's this response is disarming. Like some people, I don't know if that's the case in Germany or not, but I attended some master defenses in Egypt, and some committee members, they just want to attack you. They just want to ask very difficult questions, and they want to show you yourself in front of the people that you're stupid and that you didn't do enough work and that you don't know what you're talking about. Some people, I don't know, they enjoy that. So I think this response is disarming. This is you disarming them.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not giving them a chance to push forward with this attack.
But also, a very important thing is understand the question appropriately before answering. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So even if you already have all the slides, even if you prepared for this question very well, even if you can just ace it completely, once a question is asked, take a break, rephrase it in your own words. So if I understood it correctly, you on this slide are looking at this figure, and then you asked if this and this are same or different. Am I clear?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So understand their question, rephrase it so they hear it themselves, and if they want to add more detail or explanation to it, then they do. So you understand the question much better before answering it. This is true for the questions you know an answer to, and this is super true for the questions you do not know an answer to. Right?
All right.
So never quickly jump into answering things. I have seen so usually students are asked one thing, and they start answering in a completely different way, And then the experience or the idea of the committee is, oh, they do not understand what we asked, and then they let them speak for 2-3 minutes, so maybe they are misunderstanding them, and then they say, no, but we did not ask this, we asked this, and then they again just start answering it without really understanding the question and the basics. And the best idea to do that is to rephrase it in your own words before you start answering them. So if they want to add details, they can.
It also gives you time to think in the back end how to structure your answer and answer it a little bit better.
Yeah. It has multiple advantages, but the biggest advantage is that the committee, someone who has asked the question, feels heard, right? And if they are misunderstood, they are able to add more details, and then it gives you a better idea of what they are exactly expecting. So you are able to read between the lines and then answer. So press the right button. So answer exactly what they expect, rather than telling a long story. You can just say it was this, yes, no, this, that, and that's it, right? And that will save time, and it will show them that you know how to communicate scientifically properly.
All right. One part that we talked about is how to give your presentation, how to speak about it. Do we have time to cover that?
Yeah, that is what we want to see. Yeah. So generally everyone wants to know if you know about your research in the bigger pool, and you know about what it has contributed and what it has not contributed. So what are the limitations, right? So in the question answer session, they are basically checking if you know where you stand in the wholes. For example, they will say you use this model, you did not use 5 other models, right? What they want to hear is that, this model is relatively simple to implement, it is easy to use, it was already incorporated in the simulation model, that is why I used it. I did not use 5 others because although they are more accurate, although they are more detailed, but we wanted to start with something simple, and then maybe we can jump onto more complicated things in the future. And that is why I've used this model and not the other 5. Right? So they want to listen that there are other 5 models that exist. You know about the advantages and limitations of your model as compared to the other ones. Right? And then, for example, they will ask, why did you only extract this data where you could extract 50 other points? And then they want to listen is that, okay, this was the key point which we could actually compare with our experimental results, but of course this does not give information about this and that and this and that, but this is the only thing I could do with all these simulations in this limited time, but if I would have collected that data, that would have been better, right? So always the question and the idea is, do you know about the bigger pool, and do you know where you stand, and do you know what are the advantages and disadvantages of what you have worked on? So that is also a key point. And then we can shift to, for example, the last thing on how to prepare for the presentation, which has 2 parts. One is making the presentation, and the other one is delivering the presentation. Making of the presentation is just imagine it like a nice storyline. So it should be easy to follow, right? And I have very few points. So every slide should be neat, tidy. The presentation should be homogeneous. So the styles, figures, captions, headings should all follow a similar style and at similar places or positions. It should have a large text, and it should just follow a nice story. So these are my general guidelines. And then it is very important to, for example, have slide numbers, because when people want to later when people want to ask you to, for example, I did not understand something on here, or I have more questions there, they are always looking at which slide number to mention when you do that. And if you do not have slide numbers, although it has nothing to do technically, but they get very upset.
Right. And also the general layout of your thesis should be of your presentation should be very formal, but you can add a few transitions, as you mentioned.
Yes. So a transition that helps your story. A transition like a flutter or a butterfly flying away does not help at all. Right. But maybe a transition of maybe fading in, fading out, or one slide pushing the other in a way that it makes more sense is always nice.
Okay.
Is there a rule of thumb for the slide number? Like how many slides one should have, slide count? Or that just depends on the tempo of the person? Like someone can
No.
speak fast and so use 30 slides, someone else is a bit slow, so use 16.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it is always like this. So that is why I do not like this idea of slide of how many number of slides you should have. But I always like this idea of how much time you should give to certain topics. That is something that we covered earlier. And the last thing that I want to talk about is delivering the presentation. So usually we undermine how important it is to deliver the presentation nicely, confidently, and fluently. And do you know the secret of doing this?
Rehearsal?
Rehearsal. How much?
I would say not less than 3 to 5 times. I mean, it's a master thesis. It's
not less than 3 to 5 times what?
Total.
In total, I mean, yeah, like 3 to 5 times a full one in front of friends, in front of family members. And then you should also do some in front of yourself, in front of the mirror, maybe, I don't know. Just to know that you have the script in mind.
Yes.
Instead of going into the...
Yeah, so if 3 to 5 times is in front of other people, then I will agree with this.
Okay.
Right? But if you want to perform 3 to 5 times in front of other people, then it is much more with yourself. Right? So the few tips that I have here... okay, so I will give a little bit of the background information. I have very high bar for technical presentations because I have been participating in technical presentation competitions for a very long time. When I participated in several technical presentation competitions, and I was best presenter of country multiple times with technical presentation. So I have very high bar of presentations and so on. And the ideas that always worked for me were, first, you should have a nice story in mind, and you should always have right slides for that. Once you have them, write a script of your presentation. It is very necessary to have script of your presentation, because then you can go through this structurally every time and you will not miss any information, right? Once you have that script, memorize that script. There is no way around it.
So some people could argue against that and say that if you have a script, then you should memorize that. So if you forget that on the day of presentation, you'll just feel completely dislodged of your, like, out of tact.
No.
Out of balance.
Because if you would have memorized that script, it will give you the amount of vocabulary on every slide that is necessary to explain that. So every time, whenever that is what I am saying. So prepare your presentation well, then have a script, memorize that script, which means you should know. So for example, when I have a script, I do not write exactly the same words, but I write bullets for each presentation, and I remember those bullets. So I have to cover these 8 points on this slide, and I have to cover these 8 points on this slide.
That makes more sense, yes, to have bullets. Yeah.
So, but some people, like, for example, me, I do not follow this very rigid scheme, so I have bullets. Some people want to write whole paragraphs, so because
it's like an actor before a shoot.
Yes.
But in any case, you cannot have your script with you during the presentation. You will have to speak from your head.
Yeah, but your script is right behind you.
Yeah.
So you can always look at the slide and you will always know what to say here.
No, I mean, what she means is script,
the
like
whole thing,
the whole thing, like a white piece of paper with text on it.
Yeah, that is what I'm saying. So they are there to listen to you, right? So it is always a good idea to have good eye contact with the people, to have good body postures and hand gestures, and just be smiling and not looking at your presentation all the time, and just be looking at the people. You can watch several YouTube videos on how to give a nice talk, but you can only do that if you have less friction in your head about what do I have to say here, or which slide is this, or how do I start explaining this, right? So the idea is, once you have this story, have a script, memorize that script, and while you will be doing this, you will be practicing with yourself a lot. Right? Once you know, or once you are at this stage of, okay, I think now I'm okay with this, then start preparing, present this first to yourself. The idea of doing that is you can always turn on your PowerPoint, and you can always record your own presentation on a computer. right? Once you have done that, you can always give your presentation to your friends, to your family, to your colleagues. And it is usually hard to give these presentations to them. I do not like this idea that much. So what I do is, for example, give these presentations to your supervisors or the people who have helped you through this. So maybe someone who was doing master thesis with you, or prepare this well in time.
Or colleagues. I would say
or
colleagues are better
yes.
than family members or friends
Yes.
that know nothing about the topic.
Yes. So give this talk to them, because then they will also listen to it, and they will also be able to give you some feedback. And you do not always have to include all that feedback in your presentation, because they might say, yeah, but you are not explaining this or that. Remember that these are the questions the jury will ask later. So have extra slides for them.
Yeah.
Right? And yeah, so that's mostly it. And then the last thing that I want that I want to suggest is get the most out of your talk. What I suggest is that when you will be preparing with yourself, or when you will feel that you are prepared enough, record your presentation on your computer, because right after your defense you will quickly forget everything, and you will not be in that zone where you will know everything about your work and your experience. And then upload it somewhere. So you can upload it now, for example, on YouTube, share that link, keep it public, or you can, for example, upload it on Facebook or upload it on LinkedIn, and then people can see what you were talking about. You do not have to do it before your defense, but maybe 2, 3, 5 days, whenever you feel comfortable. But it will give you a lot of reach. People will be able to see what you worked on. You will not have to explain it to everyone, and it will always be there whenever you will want to share it with someone. So this is a side tip which I think you should always upload your videos publicly on YouTube. So you can always share this link with someone. A nice way, for example, will be to when you will be applying to several companies, in the email, just mention, yeah, I am applying because I worked on this. You can watch my work on this video. And just move on. It will very nicely complement everything.
Yeah.
So that is my extra tip there, and that is generally about this. Do you have any questions?
No, not from my side.
I would say that, yeah, I think we're done. I would just add something. Do you think that dressing up for the occasion is very important? That's something that's very secondary, but I think everyone says that you have to be very formally dressed. Is that really that important?
No. In Germany, no.
Okay.
But you have to be neatly dressed, I would say.
Okay, but you don't have to be formally dressed. Like a suit and stuff like that for men is not that important.
Is not that important.
Okay.
In Germany especially, no.
I think what I got from this discussion, and also what I realized as I was proceeding with my thesis, is that the defense is not about literally you defending against the professors or your committee. It's about knowing what they're asking or expecting of you and answering those questions. It's not about, why are they asking me these questions? This is obvious, but it's for them to make sense that you know what you're talking about, or you know what you worked on.
Absolutely.
I think that is a mindset shift that every person needs to have when they are approaching this deadline of the presentation.
Yes, absolutely. So they already know that you've worked on something. They already know that you've finished it. They already know that the work is there, and you are scheduled for a presentation, because everyone on the committee agrees for this. And that is why I'm saying they are there to pass you, and they are not there to fail you. And it is kind of a celebration that you are able to publicly show your work to everyone you want to share this with. That's right. You have to have this mind shift.
Right.
And enjoy the process.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to this podcast and tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.